Okay, we are live and happy Eclipse Day, everyone. Very exciting. We are currently filming this in Colorado. Both of us are in the mountains and we are trying to hammer this out so that we are ready for the eclipse because it has begun. Um, well, great. So this week we're going to run through a couple of different things. In case you don't know, Work Better Weekly is our weekly discussion between myself, Whitney Van Cleve, and Kaylee Van Cleve. We are the founders of Iridium Helps. Long story short, 15 years of experience helping individuals and companies as recruiters and consultants. And now we are sharing all of that behind the scenes knowledge with folks that the broader audience instead of just working for organizations. So really excited about that. And these weekly episodes are to basically let us have an opportunity to dialogue what we are observing and seeing in all of our interactions with our clients, both individuals and companies, and kind of some questions that come up over the week. So things that came up last week that we are tackling this week: buying benefits, non-competes and non-solicitations, and reference checks. Kaylee, am I missing anything?
Nope, those are the three main ones we're going to tackle this week.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and dive in. And Kaylee, I apologize. I don't have my worksheet that tells us who's going to ask what questions. So let's just wing it. I think I can remember. So jumping in with buying benefits, this is a question that came up this week, which is, what do I need to consider when I'm deciding between an HSA versus a regular plan? Kaylee, you are a benefits guru. Take us away.
Ooh, so exciting. So big things to consider is, first, how do you actually use health insurance? That should be the fundamental question that you ask yourself when you're comparing an HSA versus a traditional plan, because ultimately it needs to fit how you personally use insurance. So I'll give you some different examples. So you may be an individual who's in their 20s. You very rarely go to the doctor, and it's really more for an emergency use need, right? That might be you. Or you could find yourself kind of mid to late 30s. You have a full family. You have kids that are getting sick constantly, and maybe you're managing a couple chronic health issues or items for you and your family. Those are two very separate use cases when it comes to health insurance. And so talking about the difference between those two cases with HSA versus a traditional health plan can kind of help you see the difference between the two. So in the first example, the individual, might not be using health insurance on a regular basis. They're younger. And so really that's a prime time to consider an HSA, because an HSA basically is a health savings account where you're going to put all of your, not all of your money, but all of the money that you're allocating towards health insurance, you're going to put into a savings account. And that savings account is going to take that pre-tax dollar, so not after-tax dollars, which is kind of a nice thing on it. It's one of those tax benefits for HSA. You're going to take that money and put it into an HSA. Now, HSAs are usually anywhere between like 1.5% to 2% on their I'm missing the word, the percentage that you get to earn off of it on an annual basis.
The interest rate.
The interest. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like, dang, it's the interest rate. And so you usually have about 1.5% to 2% interest rate in an HSA. So it's kind of nice. You tap that HSA fund when you do need to go to the doctor. And so usually an HSA is paired with a really high deductible plan, meaning that you're kind of paying the first dollars in to get care. And the insurance company doesn't really start paying forward until you've met that high deductible. So you use that health savings piggy bank to draw from. So great for an occasional emergency use need. So that's the first one. Second one, I would say, oh, yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So
what's the question?
Hypothetically, if my employer, when they're showing me a high deductible plan coupled with a HSA, it shows me that they are willing to contribute $200 a month to my HSA. That's just free money that they're just putting in there, right?
Yep.
Do
That's
I have
exactly
to
right.
put money in there?
You do. So you'll want to put money in there. Otherwise, you will not be capitalizing on this piggy bank for you to draw down in the future. So if you didn't put money in there and you do have a event that comes up, you didn't get to you didn't get to capitalize on that interest of those funds being allocated into that fund. And also, you may be short, in all honesty, with
Mm.
how tight people keep budgets and paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes that can be really hard, especially in your early 20s, if you didn't put the money away into an HSA account and you, I don't know, bust your shoulder while snowboarding, Whitney, something along those lines. So yeah, you definitely want to take advantage of any contributions that your company may do to an HSA. Not all companies contribute, but some do, and that's great money to capitalize on that you can use in the future. The other thing is the HSA is actually owned by you, not the company. So if you were to transition to a different employer in the future, you can take that HSA, it follows you. So it becomes a savings account that you can use for all health purposes moving forward in your career path. So there are some nice benefits in it in scenario A. So scenario B, somebody who has, additional dependents, who seems to be using healthcare quite frequently for like those, illnesses for the kids, or they themselves or one of their family members are managing an ongoing chronic condition. HSAs and high deductibles might not be the best option because you are shouldering the burden on the front end of all of the costs for those health conditions on a yearly basis. So you might not actually see the savings you're looking for in that realm. So that's when you want to look at more of a traditional plan where you are leveraging what the insurance company will put forward to help you with those costs and then what you can put forward. So you're basically looking at a premium based plan, meaning that you will know what your premium is on a monthly basis that you're going to pay in order to get access to contributions from the carrier on covering the costs that you're going to see, right? So that could be they cover 80% of all costs up to this amount of money on this deductible. And then after that, they cover 100% of all costs moving forward. So if you're managing chronic health care, what you want to look for is the reverse of that. You want to look at lower deductibles and like the lowest deductible you can get for the amount of premium that you're able to stomach on a monthly basis to get access to the care that you need and that you're going to leverage. Those are basically the levers that you're pulling on that front. So start with what your needs are first.
And then reverse engineer it. That makes
Exactly.
sense. So then I think this plays well with kind of the next question that everybody gets. So now that we understand what an HSA is versus what a regular plan is, let's move on here to when HSAs don't work, because the main question here is one that came up. Are HSAs legit in your 30s and beyond, or kind of talk to us about when HSAs do work and don't work?
Yeah. So my personal opinion is, and others may disagree with me out there in the industry, but HSAs fundamentally kind of quit working after you kind of hit your mid to late 30s. This is usually when people see, new dependents come on, right? They might have children during this time frame. They might have a significant other that's on their plan that now is calculated into their overall insurance costs, right? They might themselves start to see some of those breakdowns, right? Like, I don't know, I tend to find myself using health insurance a heck of a lot more now in my late 30s than I did in my 20s by a long stretch. And so, really, I think that's where things start to break apart, is kind of in that like 30s realm. I think after that, traditional plans seem to be a better fit for the way people use insurance. Doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it, but I do think they're kind of fundamentally flawed after a certain age bracket.
Yeah, I think about, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I had a high deductible plan, and broke my shoulder in snowboarding in a mountain, like Kaylee mentioned, in a mountain town where there was no in-network option for me to go to for emergency care. And what ended up happening, and really, I think 90% of people have this experience where they just get friggin' rocked by the cost. And so basically my one emergency room visit where they didn't do anything other than diagnostics um, totaled out my high deductible plan. And at that point, I had elected the high deductible plan because I was of the mindset that I was young and healthy and I didn't need to worry about the ongoing monthly payment of a regular PPO. In my mind, that was just wasting money. But where the rubber met the road was that all of a sudden I had to come out of pocket with $7,500 in order to pay for this one thing. Plus, I had all of the additional physical therapy and follow up appointments and all of that wasn't even accounted for. And it went to like co-insurance after that. So my out of pocket max, I think, was something like $12,500. And I was surprised by how quickly I hit that and didn't realize that you have to have that cash available. And if I had had an HSA coupled with that high deductible, even if my employer was putting in $200 a month, hypothetically, I only would have had a small fraction of that in the HSA account. So really HSAs, it seems to me, Kaylee, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but HSAs are really effective if you start them when you're young and get contributions toward them and it grows, but it's not really a good option to start an HSA when you're older and you need the actual benefit of the health insurance. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like you have to time the staging of when you elect it to what your needs are to be effective, right? So, like in your example, Whitney, it's a great example, right? You didn't have you had the high deductible plan, but you were not contributing to the HSA, and even though you had that high deductible plan for what multiple years at that point in time, like 3 years
Yeah.
total, you had never put dollars towards an HSA to
No.
actually help you in this situation.
Right.
And so just having access to an HSA is not the same thing as funding the HSA to help you in moments of crisis. So yeah, no,
That's a
totally.
great point. Yeah,
And
that's great.
that's why I tend to think that HSAs don't really work after your like mid to late 30s. Just there's too much going on, like health
Well,
wise.
and
That it just you use insurance differently at that stage in life.
yeah, and one of the things that we were actually talking about, I think last week when this question came up was, with such a low percentage on the HSA, there's a notion out there that people can use an HSA as an investment vehicle. And I don't know what sphere of the internet and product sales of benefits this is coming out of, but like fundamentally, I think that is friggin' garbage. Like, in my opinion, A, yes, there's the tax benefit of that, but like the likelihood of realizing that is very slim. B, you can only use it for health. So they make it seem like, oh, yeah, it's this great thing that you can use whenever you're in a pickle. Well, there are a lot of parameters around what constitutes as a health savings like benefit, right? Where you can actually
Yeah.
use your HSA. I have a girlfriend who got so excited because she wanted a cosmetic procedure done and had been scrimping and saving and putting all this money into her HSA, only to find out that it was not allowable. So she had all this money that she thought she'd been saving and set aside for it, and it didn't count. So the use one, I think, is huge. And again, coming back to the interest rates, in my mind, why not just put your money in a high yield savings account like a SoFi account or something like that, where you're getting 4.6 or something like that interest that you can then use it anywhere you want. Kaylee, thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to consider how you want to leverage the funds in the future. So
Yeah.
if you are like your friend example, like you want to use it for a specific procedure and you're putting your funds away in this one vehicle and that vehicle is not accessible to be used as a payment for it, then it's not doing the function that you need, right? It's not working fundamentally. Um, a better function for her would have been a high yield savings account to cover this procedure that was going to be a cosmetic out of pocket, and probably out of network procedure, right? And so it's not the right vehicle for all the things. It's a really good vehicle for a very small set of things. So it's really great for handling a emergency cost if you build the basis. Now, keep in mind, there are limits to how much you can contribute to that HSA on an annual basis. And oftentimes that contribution limit falls way short of the out of pocket maxes that you see on some of these plans. Like Whitney, your example of like 12.5, right?
Yeah.
You would have been SOL completely, even if you had pre-funded it for a year in your HSA, you would still be coming out of pocket with almost $6,000 or $7,000 at that juncture. So yes, it can help. It's a piggy bank. It's something that you can take, and yes, it is pre-tax dollars. But is it the right vehicle for everything health? I'd say fuck no. It's
Well,
just
and so Kaylee, I think that's a great point. But like, what do you say to the people that are like, and I've been this person buying insurance for years. What do you say to the people who think, well, I've paid into a PPO and I haven't used it in 3 years. I'm literally just shitting money. Like I'm just throwing it away. It doesn't even matter. Like what is your statement around that mindset?
I think twofold. One, why are you paying for the level of PPO that you're paying for? Maybe you have selected incorrectly. A lot of people, I think, just hit renew because it's cumbersome to look at the different policies and actually analyze how they would use it most likely. So you see, a lot of times you'll see this. You'll see people who they go for the Cadillac plan because they think it's worth the Cadillac price point. But when you actually look and ask questions to them on how they've been using insurance, you realize that they have been overpaying for their type of use. And so
Yeah.
really it's about matching the type of use and reflecting on that. And then the second thing is, yes, there's going to be a cost that you're going to be putting as an outlay or a premium in a traditional plan to have access to that network, to have access to those services and products and everything. Sometimes you might actually be doing yourself a personal disadvantage by not keeping up and using the thing you're paying for. So I think that also is another thing. Like there are so many ways to leverage your health insurance premium that you're of course paying for. So why not go get those annual checks? Why not use the mental health elements that you have? You've already paid for it, so tap the hell out of it as much as you can to make sure that you're using it to your fullest degree. I mean, being healthier, you're going to already have to pay the premium, so you might as well get the most you can out of the whole damn thing. That's what I would say. So the other check and see if it's the right fit, and then see how you can actually start using the service, that you're paying for.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would say on that before we shift gears is it's kind of just a mindset shift as well, right? So rather than looking at it like I did for years, where I was like, man, I'm wasting X amount of money, flipping the script to say, I'm so glad that I am saving this amount of money in that year if I needed to, right? So I think just kind of thinking about it from a different perspective and understanding your risk tolerance. Also, one thing that I don't think we hit on earlier is like making sure that you understand your activities. And it reminded me, we actually did this last fall, around open enrollment. And I'll put a link to it. But we have like a 10 questions you should ask yourself when you're buying insurance, that is really helpful for walking you through that. Because, somebody who engages in a lot of like high risk behaviors or activities, mountaineering, skydiving, shit like that, like probably should be thinking about insurance differently than somebody who like, doesn't do those things. So
Yeah.
We'll drop a link to that. Kaylee, thanks for your insight on that. That's super helpful. Do you have anything you want to say otherwise before we shift gears?
No, I think a big thing is, double check and see what you've been doing, how you've been using it, and see what you're missing out on if you're stuck like mid-year. Because remember, we can only make changes to health plans one time per year. It's usually because of an open enrollment for your company, or because of some change that you had personally in your life that allows you access to as a qualifying event to re-look at your health insurance. So, a major move, a loss of a job, marriage, that type of thing, those kinds of things that can allow you to take a look at your coverage and see if you need to make any switches. So,
yeah, great. And then Kaylee, one thing I'll note is your audio seems like it's going in and out a little bit. As I transition to the next slide, do you want to try to maybe just switch over to your regular
yeah,
microphone?
I will do that for sure.
Cool. Non-competes, hot topic, always a hot topic, one that we have discussed at length in various forms over the last decade plus. The landscape around non-competes changes. So I think one of the first things to get out in the open right off the bat is, basically how are non-competes and non-solicitation agreements different from each other? So really top level, and I know that there are so many nuances. I'm not saying that anything we're saying is gospel. These are opinions, but fundamentally at a high level, a non-compete agreement is a document that an employer gives to an employee when they want to effectively keep them from going to work for a competitor in a similar space, like industry, geographic region, or environment, basically. So it is trying, as a company is trying to limit future employment opportunities for an employee on the front end when they hire them. A non-solicitation agreement, on the other hand, is basically like, hey, we're okay, this isn't limiting where you can work, but we are saying you can't take any employees, customers, contacts, technologies, processes, any of these things that you do while you're working for us, and walk out the door with them. So oftentimes they are served up together, but they do different things. So with that being said, I think it's important to understand that distinction from jump. So now that we know what they are, let's get into the hot take a little bit. Kaylee, here's the question that came up this week, right? Oh, I got no. We got no. Oh, I see it. Hang on. You're just muted. How do we
I might be muted
okay.
then.
All right. We're learning.
Okay. So the hot take question that I got to this week was, should I work for a company that requires a non-compete? Fundamentally, I say, heck no. Here's why. And Whitney might have a difference of opinion on this. But I think in this day and age, it is really, really hard in the changing environment that we find ourselves legally across multiple states in the US to really get a non-compete to hold. So I think if a company is pretty hard knocks on having you sign a non-compete and you're just an average worker, and you are just there, to perform your services or provide your knowledge and skill sets to the company, it's really, really problematic to sign a non-compete. The only reason you would look at signing a non-compete and being okay with it, in my view, is if you're in a executive leadership based role, right? Yeah. Or you are in a sales and business development based role. And if that is the case, you better get that non-compete a heck of a lot earlier in the process than after you sign the offer. You should see that, be able to review that with an attorney, and have a moment or two to digest to see If what they are offering you is worth you making the concession personally, if you exit the company and not be able to continue doing the work that you're good at, that is a big question. So I say typically, no, do not sign employment agreements that have non-compete clauses unless it absolutely fundamentally makes sense and it is a fair arrangement between you and that employer. That's my stance, at least. I don't think you should.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm kind of a little bit more of a on the fence about it. I think more than anything, what you should look at a non-compete if you're presented with one and try to read into it. I think it will tell you a lot about the company. And by that I mean, so things that courts are currently looking at with non-compete agreements and what's being upheld and what's not. And just like super nerdy quick backstory, in the United States, law and employment law and labor law tends to swing back and forth on a pendulum over the years, from more employee friendly to more employer friendly. Back and forth we go. And so we're currently in a shift where we have become more employee centric. And with that, that's why you're seeing all of these challenges come up. 10 years ago, when Kaylee and I were delivering offers and working with our corporate clients on putting together packages, I mean, it was a no-brainer. You hit every single person with a non-solicitation agreement. You hit every person with a non-compete, a non-disclosure, and a confidentiality agreement. It was a very employer-heavy documentation. And that has gradually shifted over the years. So now that we're in this kind of new landscape, the things that are being looked at and challenged with non-compete agreements are they overly broad? And so that goes into what Kaylee's talking about. Like, does it make sense in any way, shape, or form? We've seen non-compete agreements that cover the entire US. That's fucking insanity. Like, if somebody sends you one, this is where the reading into it comes in, right? If somebody gives you a non-compete agreement that says you can't work for anybody else in the US, you can tell them to pound pavement in my book. Like, that's not a company you want to work for, because that is just absurd. So that, and then like you said, Kaylee, the function, like, does it actually make sense? And then finally, it's like kind of the duration, right? We've seen over the years non-competes that have clauses that are like 10 years. I mean, you're depriving an individual of their ability to earn a living for 10 years. And fundamentally, that is what the courts are saying right now. Like, you can do whatever you want when you're hiring people, and you can try to protect the business and the business assets, but fundamentally, you can't deny people their ability to earn a living wage. So I guess I'm with you. I think I would stress to look at non-competes through that lens of, does it make sense fundamentally? And then the other thing is, if it does make sense, I would ask for something for it. Oh, okay. You want me to sign a non-compete agreement? Great. I want a $60,000 signing bonus. You should always try to get something in kind, right? If you're going to sign away any of your kind of like rights or your opportunity for recourse. So that's my take on it.
We've actually seen, Whitney, kind of parlaying off that, we've seen some states actually require you to have that in order to put a non-compete in front of someone. You need to have some kind of in-kind payment, whether that be a signing bonus, where you are signing this non-compete and this is part of that transaction. It's to offset that, an in-kind payment, or it pre-identifies, if you exit, what the company is required to pay you upon exit to uphold that duration of that non-compete for you. So there are two different ways to kind of approach it. But fundamentally, Whitney's right. You want to say pound pavement if there's no in-kind, or if it's too broad. The geographic region is insane. Also, fundamentally, if it does not fit with where your career path is going to go, if this is going to be a major disruptor for you professionally, you may want to really consider whether or not it's worth saying yes to the offer. You can also negotiate these things. Like, you know, we're going to talk later about like when to call an attorney on this, but call an attorney and see if you can negotiate some of these terms.
Yeah. So let's hop over to that right now. The question that came up is, when should I talk to an attorney about non-competes? A couple of things here that I've seen even in the last week working with clients. Oh yeah, like HR departments, God love them. You guys fight the good fight, do your work, whatever. But like, holy shit, I do not understand why presenting people with employment documentation that they're expected to sign at the time of offer is so difficult. And, you know, we've worked with our clients on this over the years, but realistically, if somebody delivers you an offer letter and it says that it is contingent upon signing of any employment documentation or company policies or anything like that, you should ask, if they don't give it to you, you should ask for all of that documentation on the front end before you sign an offer. Because one of the things that we've been seeing quite a bit lately is, oh, okay, here's your offer. Person accepts the job, and then they get hit with this huge stack of very intense legal documentation and contracts that they are expected to sign. Well, in the interim, they could have foregone another offer. They, you know, are missing out on opportunities. In some cases, yeah, intellectual properties involved where it's like, oh, we want rights to all of your stuff. So it's nonsense. It's crazy. And if you're getting offers, absolutely be asking for your documentation. And also HR departments, get your shit together because it's absurd. But
you need in a lot of states, you need 10 days before you start your first day on the roll. You have to have all of those docs in place, or at least been available to you 10 days prior to that in a lot of the states now. So to show up on your first day and sign all these docs does not work anymore.
Well, especially when you don't have any time to review them. You know, it's like, here's your stack of papers, sign it and hand it over to Brenda in accounting before, you know, lunch. And it's like, well, shit, there's 500 pages of documents I need to read. So that is fundamentally one of the things that I think is a huge risk for people right now that we're seeing on trend when it comes to seeking the advice of an attorney. There are a number of things that you should review and take a look at. Always read all of your documentation all the way through. Make sure you're annotating if you have any questions or you want clarification. Then you can always go back to the person who's presenting you the offer. Or if you have like questions about how it could apply to you and where your personal interest needs to be accounted for, that's when you need to reach out to an attorney. I recommend looking at an employment attorney specifically. If you can't swing that, contract law is probably your next best bet, because most of the time we're talking about contracts. It's critical. And if you are somebody who is very cost conscious, like myself, a lot of times I'll say, no, you know, it's not worth the money or something like that. You know, reach out to you. There's so many available affordable options through LegalZoom, things like that. You can, you know, a lot of times we'll review documents for our clients, and we can kind of address things from consulting and HR perspective before it goes to an attorney. A lot of times it doesn't need to go to an attorney unless it's a really complex case. But long story short, it's worth the money to have individuals outside of this look at it with your best interest in mind.
Yeah, you want a professional to take a look at the docs and give you any kind of heads up on things that might be problematic. Just so you know, because you need to assess your own risk tolerance in accepting and, you know, really engaging in an employment relationship with an organization. That's fundamentally kind of where we stand. Things that pop up, at least in my mind, things where we see a lot, where you definitely want to make sure you understand non-competes, is as you elevate in a career path and you get into kind of leadership or director level roles, you better really understand how that plays for you personally for non-compete, non-solicitation, and confidentiality combinations. Same thing with any kind of patents. So if you are engineering and science oriented, that's really one of the big sticklers that typically happen in that pre-employment phase, is making sure that you understand how to protect your work that you have had and protect it from your future employer. A lot of times we'll see engineers have patents or scientists have patents that they want to make sure that they quarantine off, and it doesn't necessarily just kind of get absorbed into their future employers' intellectual property. So understanding those elements, and that's another employment or another attorney type that you might want to look at beyond the employment, is a patent attorney if you're in that sphere. And we're happy to give recommendations. So if you guys have questions or would like to ask those kinds of questions, feel free to shoot us a note or reach out to us on the on-demand HR function with us, or on-demand function.
Yeah. Cool. I think that covers it. So then let's hit our last bucket here. Reference check confusion.
Reference checks.
So
They're kind of going out of style, right? Like, I feel like they are.
what did you say? They're going out of style?
Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing more and more employers being like, reference checks are just a waste of time. Oh my goodness. They're going out of style, I think, in theory.
Yeah, I think, okay, so hang on, I'll hit that button again in a minute. Let's jam on that. I agree. I think they are going out of style. I think the reason they're going out of style is because people are afraid that they're going to get fucking sued for asking discriminatory questions or questions that they're not allowed to ask about, right?
True.
Which in my mind is a failure of whoever is responsible for hiring manager. Two, I think it's happening because more hiring managers are actually doing the full hiring function because HR is not, or is not doing it effectively or quickly. We're seeing a lot leaner HR departments because of market forces, et cetera. So I think that's part of it, is like where the responsibility is. Who has time to do it, I think, is a big thing. Is most people are like, well, I decided I like this person. I don't need to take the time to do a reference check. Those are kind of like the three reasons. The last one being like, I think I already like them. I don't need to necessarily do a reference check unless I'm like asking or looking for like confirmation bias, right? To reinforce my idea that I have already selected somebody who's going to be a fit for the job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think those are the three factors that play as to why we're not seeing reference checks as often. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's I think we also put reference checks. Classically, reference checks have always been put into the stage of like, hey, we've made our decision. This is who we want to go with. And at that time, in that time spot, in the timeline overall, it's a hyper condensed process. It's like right now in today's hiring world, you're seeing candidates have multiple offers. And so companies don't want to lose somebody simply to do a reference check. And I think that's a failure to consider where we're putting that effort in the overall timeline of hiring. I think there are alternative paths that we can go down that can get you those insights before you get into a time crunch function.
So then, Kaylee, with that being said, because I agree with you 100%, where in the process, given how tight the timelines are, how quick the turns are, where do you think the reference check should live in that process now?
I think it should be earlier. So if I'm looking at kind of the overall kind of life cycle, so if you look at a life cycle of a hiring process, right, you've got the initial kind of jump off into, defining the role, posting the role, doing the outreach, bringing the candidates in for interviewing, and then we go through kind of multiple interviews and then do the reference, and then we do the offer, right? Well, there's no sense that the reference needs to be there. You can actually collect the references on your 3 to 4 candidates that are making it into that interview stage. And even if you had those 3 to 4 candidates after your very first interview with them and your team, somebody that's really getting like pretty good thumbs up, maybe not strong thumbs up, but pretty good thumbs up, I would put your references there. You might learn new things that you'd want to explore further into your second stage interviews. and
Yeah.
you're better prepared as a team to assess the candidate. And then you're not in that time crunch. Plus, the candidate themselves is willing to provide you those references because they're in the key momentum, right, of that process in that stage. So I think classically we've put the reference checks in a wrong stage. That's my
Yeah. And so that kind of, okay, so the question was like, can you use them in a meaningful way? And I think you just tapped this from a timing perspective. When we say meaningful, I think for a lot of us, what we're really talking about is what is the purpose of a reference check? And I think a lot of times we have this idea that people are providing references as a positive person that is going to just say, yeah, this person's great. Here's why I like them. And I think that is a lot of times what comes out of it and how we think about it. But realistically, hiring managers should be considering reference checks as a way to understand more information, not about whether or not the candidate is good or bad or otherwise. They should be using it to understand how that individual can work best with them. So by asking the questions, like, what is it like to work with that individual? And asking about, it's actually, the reference check is about you as the hiring manager. What questions do you have that you need to understand about how this person works in order for you to make that determination of whether or not you're going to hire? So I think if we think about it in that respect, it makes it meaningful as opposed to just getting a little bit of a, fluffy, cotton candy answer that is going to reinforce the decision that you've already made, which is you want to hire this person, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think about it as this way: like the classic way of thinking about a reference check is it comes across as kind of like a review of a restaurant online, right? Oh yeah, 5-star, thumbs up, great X, Y, and Z service. But the real purpose, like a meaningful use of a reference check, is to actually uncover how the person works. So
Yeah.
I look for certain things, as well as Whitney, when we do reference checks for our clients. What we do is we look for, how does this person, how best do we work with this candidate? Getting advice from the reference on what they found to be helpful, because what you're really looking for is does this person need a specific kind of environment, and how does that match up with our environment, right, that we are going to put them into? We want to make sure that they're successful and we're successful. So how do they like to be communicated with? What are some tips and tricks that you had when working with them? Were there any friction points or things that you actively worked, you actively had to work towards with them in order to have them be more successful in working with you? Things like that. So like elements that are really helping you frame out their day-to-day work and how they approach work, rather than, are they a good teammate? Okay, let's unpack it further. To be a good teammate, we need clear communication. Are they timely in how they get things to you? What kind of format? How did you find it really beneficial to manage the individual? Those kinds of questions. So that's how you make a reference check meaningful to you as a hiring manager. Because Whitney's right. You do want to, you're trying to assess, like, how does this person work best for me and with me?
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of brings us to this. I keep hitting the buttons too soon. And also, Kaylee, I don't know if you noticed, it's starting to get dark.
I know. We might have to go out and look at the eclipse. So
we're almost gravy on this, but there's a couple things I want to hit again. So I hit that and then it popped up and then when it went away. So I'm going to do it one last time. But like, is it crazy to ask hard hitting questions of your references? So no. In fact, like, I think it's fucking insane to me that like you have this opportunity that is presented to you as a hiring manager with the full understanding, okay, that somebody will be calling and asking questions about this individual. Like, it is the responsibility of the candidate to make sure that they have selected people that are going to provide value to whoever's checking the reference. Okay. So that's not your concern. Your concern is not to make sure that they've picked a good reference or somebody who's going to speak highly of them. Your only concern, exactly as Kaylee said, should be, what do I need to uncover? What questions do I need to ask to understand how I can work with this person and bringing it into that personal space again? So in those events, I do not think it's out of line to ask the tough questions. You know, if you are concerned because you have a candidate that responds to your emails 3 days after you send them, and you're hiring them for a position that requires constant and timely communication, I would be asking about, hey, I am looking at this person for a role that requires constant and timely communication. Is this a thing that you think that this individual would thrive in? Or do you have any suggestions for how I could manage them, understanding that this is the environment, right? Have the conversation with the reference like they are an individual, like an equal. It is a conversation between equals. And one thing I would just love to stress here is, you better make damn sure on the front end that you ask in what capacity they worked with that individual, because it's the thing that's going to guide all of your other questions. If you don't know whether you're talking to somebody who worked with them as a peer, as a manager, as a subordinate, as a supervisor, like all of those follow-up questions trickle down off of that first one. So make sure that you ask that. Kaylee, anything you want to add before we hop over to the questions we wish people asked?
No, I think that's perfect. I think your two examples are great that you just gave.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I actually realized that's my big one.
I've got one here. So
Yeah.
kind of going off of what Winnie mentioned earlier, one of the big things that I wish that managers knew and did in reference checks is I wish they would quit leading the witness. So if you have a question, like Whitney had just put together her two different examples. Her first one was framed about, hey, this person is slow to communicate. So how did you manage that? That's technically leading the witness. Her second question on how she framed it was far better. How do I, with the need to have quick communication for this role, how does this person manage their communication to fit that need, right? Or that's even a leading a witness. Now I need to come up with one that's like not a leading a witness one.
No, I think what you're speaking to is something that's really relevant, which is like, when it comes to reference check questions, it takes consideration and it's not formulaic. For years, right, in working in recruiting firms and running recruiting teams, we tended to have a standardized reference check form with very standard questions, and that was helpful. And then people would open up. But it was also one of those things where a lot of times you just get like one word answers and you were like, well, that's not useful at all. So I think what you're talking about right now with the leading questions highlights that it takes intentionality and work to come up with the questions that are meaningful to you as the hiring manager, right?
Yeah, and I tend to think, like, if you have something that is a question that you want to ask, write it down and say, this is the information I need to get, and then figure out how to formulate that question so that it is not a leading question, right? So you're not leading them to give you the outcome that you're requesting. You're strictly asking from an informational basis so you can actually get a clean set of data. That's basically what you're looking for. You're looking for questions that give you the insight that you're looking for, as well as the cleanest set of data possible from that individual about the candidate. That's what I would say.
That's great, Kaylee, because you're effectively you're reverse engineering it from what you're looking for information wise. I really like that, and this makes me think that this is probably something that we could expand upon and maybe like bring some resources together for, because you're right. It's almost as doing reference checks is almost a skill that like we don't really think about people being trained in. So good to know.
Let's go check out this eclipse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that covers it. We've done the damn thing. Next week we're gonna tackle a whole bunch of new questions that came up. So hopefully this was useful. Obviously, we appreciate any any sharing, following, liking. We're out on the platforms all over the place. We are working through trying to understand our content flow and distribution channels and everything like that. So the more feedback you can provide us at this stage, the more we can understand kind of our direction, because we are small business owners who are working it out on our own.
Exactly. Have a great week.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the eclipse. Don't stare at the sun.
Yeah. Use goggles.
Get the goggles. Okay. Bye.